Welcome back. In Oklahoma, the contest to succeed retiring Republican Senator Don Nichols has become fierce, with control of the U.S. Senate possibly at stake. Former Republican Congressman Tom Coburn is being challenged by Democratic Congressman Brad Carson. Their latest ads target the state's moderate base.
Do you recognize this big-time liberal? Here's a few hints. He's voted for taxpayer-funded abortions, is one of the biggest spenders in all of Congress, voted against passing welfare reform twice, and against Bush tax cuts. It's Brad Carson, who may just be the most liberal politician in all of Oklahoma.
Tom Coburn called people in Oklahoma City crapheads. Now he's calling Brad Carson a liberal. Brad Carson has an A rating from the NRA. He voted against taxpayer-funded abortions every time, and President Bush praised Brad Carson for supporting his tax cuts. Tom Coburn, he's not far right, he's far out.
In the latest poll conducted by SoonerPoll.com, Democrat Carson has a 7-point lead. That compares with a 6-point lead for Republican Coburn just 1 month ago. Joining us now from Norman, Oklahoma, is Keith Gaddie, the editor of SoonerPolitics.com and professor of political science at the University of Oklahoma. Thanks for coming in, Keith.
Mark, it's a pleasure to be here.
Keith, how do you explain Coburn's drop in the polls, an apparent dramatic 13-point swing?
Well, we really need to note a couple of things here. Brad Carson has run a very effective campaign, and what he's done is he's taken Tom Coburn's own words and Tom Coburn's own actions and turned them against the man that we all thought would be the front runner for this U.S. Senate seat.
And anything in particular? I mean, is there a particular example of that?
Well, you know, this ad you just showed touched on part of it. Tom Coburn has a very off-the-cuff manner, and he made some remarks regarding politicians in Oklahoma City, which were taken to mean the entire community. He had voted evidently against tornado relief in the state of Oklahoma in 1999 when we had a big Category 5 tornado blow through. He had evidently worked against transportation dollars coming to Oklahoma, and Brad Carson has really taken these issues and framed them against Tom Coburn.
I see. Margaret Carlson.
Keith, it's not something that Brad Carson brought up, but when it was revealed that Tom Coburn, when he was a doctor, had engaged in sterilizations without the permission of the patient, how did that play in the race? Did it have any effect?
Well, Margaret, it probably had some effect. It certainly didn't play all that well. Tom Coburn's stock in trade is his earnestness and his forthrightness. And as I indicated before, sometimes that means words get taken out of context. The explanations for what happened seem technical and legalistic, which are inconsistent with Tom Coburn and actually consistent with the kind of politicians they have attempted to tie Brad Carson to.
Kate O'Byrne.
Keith, President Bush is running, 26 points ahead of John Kerry in Oklahoma. And as we saw, Brad Carson is actually touting something nice George Bush once said about him. But the latest Republican ad points out that Brad Carson has voted against President Bush's agenda more than I think they point to Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. Is that going to be news to the kind of conservative Democrats who at the moment might be supporting Brad Carson?
I'm not sure if it's that much news. This line of reasoning has been thrown at Brad Carson all summer, that he's the most liberal politician in the state, more liberal than Ted Kennedy and Hillary Clinton. And if you look, what Carson did was a real nice job of positioning himself as a conservative Democrat, as a real moderate. And it was easy to do symbolically. To refute that requires a lot of technical argumentation that the voters may not be paying attention to yet and may not have the time to pay attention to.
Hal Hunt.
Keith, let me go back to Tom Coburn. My wife was born in Oklahoma, and I know that is a very conservative state. But Tom Coburn, in addition to some of the earlier comments that we noted, has said this is a race between good versus evil. His candidate for president 4 years ago was Alan Keyes. He even talked once about banning Schindler's List. Is there a sense that Tom Coburn is not a conservative but a radical?
Well, that certainly is a sense that Brad Carson is trying to create. Tom Coburn won the primary this summer because he was seen as a social conservative and a fiscal conservative, and he ran a masterful campaign. Since August, that mastery has not been there, and he's allowed Brad Carson to paint him as not being far right but far out. So what Coburn is doing now is reconstructing back towards being simply to the far right rather than being a radical.
Keith, looking at this race, the Republican establishment of the state opposed Tom Coburn. They backed Mayor Humphreys in the primary and got their clock cleaned by Tom Coburn. Are they a potential source of Carson votes? I mean, Kate O'Byrne raises the point: if George Bush is carrying the state by 25 points and it's a reliably Republican state, where will those votes come from if Brad Carson is to win?
Well, part of it has to be, this is still a state that has a majority Democratic registration. So part of it is bringing those old conservative Democrats back home. But part of it is going after what we call the dollar Republicans, Republicans who are interested in business opportunity, and who are not averse to working with government. I was speaking with one Republican this week who observed that while Tom Coburn's the kind of guy you want to have in the Senate, you just don't want him there from your state because he may not do business.
Margaret Carlson.
Right. He does care more about God's gays and guns than most other things. He also doesn't seem to like Indians. He called the treaties a joke. Does that matter in Oklahoma? What are the Indian tribes doing?
Yes, it matters in Oklahoma. The polling shows that the tribes are very strong for Brad Carson. In addition, we have a pretty wide open state legislative situation here with term limits, and there's a lot of effort to get the Indian vote out in a variety of areas in support of Democrats. Brad Carson, we also must remember, is a member of the Cherokee tribe, so he has special appeal to the Native American community on that basis.
We have less than a minute. Go ahead, Kate.
Look, Tom Coburn was a popular member of Congress when he represented his district in Oklahoma. Many of these things were said about him then, and people liked the fact that he was a citizen legislator. He went back to delivering babies.
Yep.
Won't that benefit him in November, that popularity?
It shouldn't hurt. And the thing we have to remember, though, is that since Tom Coburn left Congress, the guy who's been representing his old district is Brad Carson.
Good point. Keith, Gaddie, thank you so very much for being with us. The Capitol Gang will be back with our Outrages of the Week. It was good.